Welcome, folks, to the Breakneck Podcast. I am Ian Sweeney, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Pashensky. Say hi, Matt.
Hello.
And so, why are we here? Well, it's all about two founders working on how to use AI in our businesses, and we are joined this week by a third founder, a buddy of mine, Mr. Jeff Berezny. Say hi, Jeff.
Hey.
So let me give you a bit of context for Jeff. So Jeff and I worked together previously, kind of traveling around the US and the globe, pitching our wares to large global enterprises and implementing programs. And Jeff made a decision a couple of years ago to kind of embrace AI, Jeff, I suppose is the best way to do it in
Yeah,
the creative
sure.
context. But why don't you give us a bit of your background?
Yeah, I mean, my background was first in sort of corporate big brand advertising, managing big brand campaigns, marketing, and then eventually left that and said, hey, this social media digital frontier is coming. I'm going to start my own agency and spend 100% of my time helping companies transition into sort of the digital frontier. And now, many years ago, and then eventually joined a startup in San Francisco where I met Ian, and at that stage worked as head of marketing, and then moved into head of design, head of product, and was spending a lot of time managing medium-sized teams from design and through product development. And then what really happened was I was spending so much time kind of up in a pretty high realm managing people, and I started to feel like I was never really doing the work. And then as AI started to progress, and I had an opportunity to, when that company got bought, I moved on to the next frontier and said, what am I going to do next? And I really had a desire to be in the weeds and do the work. And that sort of perfectly aligned with the opportunity of AI, where you can now do, one, two-person shops and do much more than you could normally do and would require a full team of designers, developers, product managers, account managers. So really my business, BZY or BZ Design, is an experiment in how much can I do as one person, being constantly on the cutting edge of AI, doing almost everything myself. Now I do sub out some things, but doing almost everything myself, from outreach to lead gen to account management, pitching, design, development, QA, deployment, all at once. And so far it's been fun and a challenge at the same time.
And Jeff, when you started, you kind of had this thesis, and this, just for context, this isn't kind of 6 months old. What are you now, 2 or 3 years into this journey?
Yeah.
And 2 years in eternity in kind of the AI hype cycle. But when you started, then you kind of had a thesis that AI could be the foundation to build this type of a business. Where do you sit on that 2 years in? You're arguably one of the most seasoned people in AI and the creative agency in the world, right? 2 years
Sure.
is ages. So
Is an eternity.
educate us here a little bit.
I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I mean, as we all know, if you follow the AI news, it's impossible to stay on track of what's the latest is. In fact, if anybody says they know what's going on in AI, they fundamentally don't know what's going on in AI, because you never know what's going to be dropped tomorrow, and the competition between all these different companies and new companies popping up. So you don't know where it's going to go. What I would say from the creative point of view, and I can dig into many different areas here, but I think the majority of AI development, and rightfully so, I think has been focused on primarily development, like programming. I think like the big investments from OpenAI and from Google are really into the coding side of it. So I think from my point of view, and I'm not a coder by background, but I have now dabbled in it quite a bit, but a lot of the work is going there. When you look at the creative side of it, outside of Midjourney and some of the latest image gen tools, it's been very light, like very, very light, and not targeted at creative execution, particularly for clients or project work. It's been much more targeted at what I would call like arty creation or artsy creation and exploration. So let's create art. Let's not create a client deliverable that they need a website, or they need a promo poster, or they need this and that. So I would say broadly, from a creative point of view, it's a lot of work. It's not like it's like turnkey and suddenly you like AI just does the job for you. Now, I know that's also not the same in every industry, but I would say in particular in the creative industry, it's actually still lagging quite a bit. And I can go into some more detail on the actual workflow, but before I do that, I think I'll just say, or we can get into it, is I would say, you might appreciate this example. I kind of call it like the last mile problem in AI. So if you're familiar with ride sharing, which I know you are, Ian, is that the big problem that always needed to be solved with the last mile problem was that you had all these delivery drivers for your food, Amazon packages, for whatever it would be. It would bring it to the city, but then to get it that last few blocks was always really hard. And that was a very expensive endeavor. And I actually think AI you can kind of draw the same parallels in a lot of things. You can say, well, wow, AI is going to solve all these problems, but it really has a last mile problem where it can go to maybe 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, depending on the task, but it can't get it to that 100% that's going to actually be useful for a complete project or for a client. And I would say coding is probably like getting really close, depending on what you're trying to do and what platform you're using. But creative, it's very far away. You're kind of like getting halfway to where you need to go, and then you kind of need to get on foot and hoof it for the last 50%.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of questions around that. I mean, is there, are we waiting for something to happen to be like, oh, here it is? Like OpenAI a couple of weeks ago launched the next generation of DALL-E, whatever they called it. But what was really intriguing to me was the ability to go back and visually edit an image. It was like, oh, okay, I like this, but can you take Jeff's cap off, for example? Like that's a sort of a step function better. From your perspective, thinking, I suppose, more broadly, like what's missing here? What's the next big thing that needs to happen, if there is one singular thing?
I don't. I mean, there's obviously this sort of panacea or utopia idea that I could say, type a prompt, make a website. Because where I focus primarily is building websites. By the way, websites and apps and decks, presentation decks, pitch decks, and there's kind of this concept that you can do that, type a prompt, make a website. And there's probably 10 or 11 really like big, like successful companies that are doing that. They say AI website builders, where you go to the site and you write a prompt and it creates you a website. Now it creates you a website, but it's very often, and it's impressive. It's got images in it. It's got colors. It's got copy. You say like, give me a website about a podcast that tackles, AI and how founders are handling it, and it'll create one. But it'll probably be like 75 to 80% there, and not really useful unless you really don't care and you just want to throw a website up. So
Yeah.
I think my
Well, I was just going to say that it's because you helped us at Beppo, right, with our. I mean, call it a website, right? But it's much more than a website. It's like it's the presentation layer of the digital presentation layer of the whole business, and the artifact that's generated. Yeah, that's cool and everything. But the bit that, and you, this is a pat on the back for you because I've said this to you many times. Like the two things that were important was the aesthetic, right? And the aesthetic needed to fit the positioning and the narrative, and the positioning and the narrative, and then they're like, okay, what needs to be on this presentation was actually the hard part. Like I can't remember how much time we spent on it, but we probably spent 60, 70% of our time, you and I, talking about what it was going to be and why it needed to be that way. And then you layered
yeah.
on the beautiful aesthetic, and then the spitting out of the website was almost easy. So that most human creative, and we keep circling back to this, the creative aspect of it, I don't feel like there's been a lot of progress in that space, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think, as I said before, kind of the like tying it all together into one package. And my positioning is what I do, and my real grand experiment right now is leveraging AI with a human touch, essentially. So sort of human powered tech, AI accelerated, sort of a heart and a robot. Is kind of what I'm sort of working with is pairing those two things together, because I think today and for a long time in the future, I believe between 5 and 10 years, if not longer, that's going to be needed to varying degrees. And I would say in what happens if you prompt AI for a website or for a deck or anything, you get something, but it might not be useful. And an important word or concept perhaps we could circle back to is context. It's like you can get AI to make you something, but it doesn't know who your audience is. It doesn't know like really who you are and how you want to engage that and piece that together. So if I say give me a website, it might give me a website that is similar to 90% of the websites out there. But honestly, 90% of the websites out there are garbage.
I was building a presentation this week, and as preparation, just kind of like constantly going back and like, what is the core of this? I had to do
Hmm.
deep research on my
Hmm.
own company. And what it found is it's all connected. OpenAI is all connected into LinkedIn, and so I got all
Yes.
of these LinkedIn posts I'd made, which I actually put
Yeah.
a fair amount of work into, and it was able to repurpose that context. I mean, it was just telling me my own words back to me, but it was like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was a
Totally
productive
cool. Yeah.
step. What do you think is the most, like, I think the ideal of running a one or two person agency is fantastic. You don't have to worry about quality control. You have to worry about scaling, but quality control
Hmm.
is there, which is always the big thing. You build until your agency no longer is good.
Yeah.
Is I think what most people do, right? So if
Yeah.
you're able to scale it up, but keep making it bigger, but at one or two people, that's the dream. Is you don't have to worry about the quality control. You can maintain image. You can be flexible. What are the things that AI, you talked about lead generation, all those different aspects that are allowing you to unlock? Because it's not just, designers as part of a design firm. It's all those different things have to go together. So what are the
Hmm.
main things where you are finding that it's far enough along that it's majorly unblocking you?
I would say in the customer acquisition and lead gen stage, almost zero for me today. And the only reason I say that is what you mentioned before is scaling is actually the issue. Like if I get one or two more customers on any one day, I just I just break. If so, I actually try not to go the mass scale and use AI to find me as many leads as possible and push it out as far as possible. What I do think though is I think I can better leverage AI, and AI can be used to generate thought leadership and experiments and show the experiments that I'm creating so that I can attract really high quality leads. Because I quite honestly don't have time to go through low quality leads, and I've been hit with a lot of those when I've tried to like do mass outreaches, and I just don't have the time for it. Now, I'd say as far as acceleration of AI through my workflow and process, I'd say there's two really key areas that I use every single day, all the time. One is sort of the death of stock photography. This is very practical and applicable. Like I just, anytime somebody says I'm going to use stock photography, I simply say, no, no way. Why? Why would you do that? And the fact that I can come up to any client and say, I'm going to provide for you the design, the copy, the all of the imagery, and it's all going to be original imagery, and the development, all from one person, all in less than 4 weeks, is something that is unheard of, even 2 years ago. And I think the unlock of stock of AI photography and that photography being original is really massive. And I would say the way that my kind of a high level look at how my workflow works, and why I say creative still needs a lot of I would say creative project management, and there's a lot of opportunity there. Sorry, within the AI space. But the way that I do it is basically back and forth. So imagine you have like a really smart photographer sitting beside you, and I have a website, and I need to poke in 4 different images. I don't say, give me images for this website. I go, okay, so there's this first section. This section is about, how best to places that we operate in the world, and we want to show a picture of San Francisco, London, and Hong Kong. And then I go over to the AI and say, get me a photo of London, get me a photo of Hong Kong, get me a photo of San Francisco, and then go in, and then I go back and forth with Midjourney and say, let me pop all these in individually. So really, the workflow is much more like cyclical versus prompt based. It's sort of prompt, come back, come back, come back, come back, come back, come back the whole time versus just thinking you're going to pull a rabbit out of a hat and something's going to appear.
So very fast. I mean, that's what I hear with, it's funny. I spend a lot of time thinking about like AI project management. That's what my company is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Neat.
there's two kinds of project management, which is you have a whole bunch of different people, and you need them all to coordinate.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's coming on Thursday, so you'll need to have this done Wednesday. Otherwise, our client meeting on Thursday is going to be a wash. And so they're just keeping people on track, and that's how I originally came to the problem. Is solving that. And what we find more is that yeah, so suddenly certain companies are able to operate with one or two people, and so project management really becomes mostly about managing what you might call like agents, AI agents,
Yeah.
uh,
Sure.
which is what you're talking about prompting. It's just like a kind of a longer work with me until I'm satisfied on this is kind of giving that to a secondary person. And my point is in software development, what we find is that it's actually you don't build software by saying, okay, change this line of code, change that line of code. You say, write it from scratch, but I want it to be more like this. And it only takes 25 minutes
Mm-hmm.
for the whole program to be rewritten. And so you're giving
Mm-hmm.
those agents bigger and bigger tasks, but the iteration cycles can be so fast. You find yourself feeling like you're managing these kind of little humans rather than
Yeah.
doing work
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah, totally, which I think is exciting. And I would say one of the areas that I've been trying to unlock that I haven't unlocked yet that I think is interesting. There's all this talk about agents and all this talk about having an army of agents go while you're sleeping, going and doing all of these things with you. And I know that it's all happening right now and it's practical and theoretically possible. But the reality is I still need to like kind of like hold that agent's hand, I feel like, through it. So it's kind of like I can't really go to sleep and send all these interns out to do things because if you've worked with interns, which I know you guys have, interns, you still need to sit beside them and go like, no, you're looking at the completely wrong page. You're not even on, you're in the wrong stratosphere. So, and you don't want the intern to spend all night doing that. Now, the pro of AI, I suppose, is that they can spend all night doing it and you don't have to really pay them anything and you can start again the next day.
Well, there's this concept of like, you ever heard one-shotting as like a
Uh,
verb, gerund, I guess? The idea is that there's certain things that you give it to AI and it comes back kind of close, and then you go in and edit it. And then there's this frontier of things that you can give to a computer and it comes back on the first shot with the right answer.
right.
It didn't
Got it.
take
Yeah, yeah.
multiple prompting. And, yeah, I always thought this was an interesting concept, and in software development, they've gotten pretty good. Like it can do this with just a prompt. You just prompt it, do this, and it comes back with the right answer. It used to not be able to write a for loop, and then it could one shot a for loop, and then it could one shot building a
Sure.
small video game, and
Yep.
so on. And I think that's like a really important concept. That is basically what you're talking about is like, what can I give you that I'm pretty confident you're going to come back 70, 80, 90% of the time and be done and not just
Mm.
work all night overnight because when
What are
you're
the
ready.
one shots? Yeah.
What are the one shots that you see as closest in the design field?
Well, I'll give you a practical example that I actually had in the last week. That was almost a one shot. Now let's call it a one shot with deep research. So whether that's, I guess that it
No, that's
can
the thing.
still
You
be the
give
same thing.
once you give
Yeah.
it to the computer, it comes back with something. It doesn't matter how.
Yeah, so I mean, this was very early in a project. One of the things that I spend a lot of time on, and every creative should, is the inspiration phase. And I actually think that a lot of the time, particularly if you haven't spent time in traditional creative, you skip that. You skip these hours often of scrolling through different pages of creative, whether that's on Dribbble or Pinterest or award sites and all these different areas to really get your head around what the project is. And I think one of the projects that I did just last week was I needed to put together kind of an initial inspiration set of several different websites for a redesign of an agency website, a marketing agency website. And I said, and Google had just released its new deep research, and ChatGPT already had its. And I said, let's do head to head. I'm going to set them both up and say, give me like research as many different angles of creative as possible for agency websites, split it into 3 different buckets of type, whether that's traditional, modern, progressive websites. And then I want you to go away and come back and list all of the different websites and prepare it in a way that with even with a little talk track that can help me have one of these kickoff meetings or informational meetings about this project. And I would say, actually, Gemini nailed it. OpenAI kind of not so much. But they say that the new Gemini model is, one of the best, if not the best. And so that was really cool because I could take this time to I just went out for dinner and came back and it was done. Now I would say the downside of it is something that happens in the creative exploration and inspiration phase is that you're kind of like thinking as you're going. So I think
Yeah.
something that's a big danger is taking the iterative modular movements that your brain is doing and your creative energy is doing as you move from inspiration to inspiration. Because if you just get one set of 20 web pages and you go, cool, then you haven't sort of struggled through it yourself to really find where maybe the creative path should be. And I think that might be one of the biggest tensions and places that humans should always be within the creative process is that sort of creative angst. And what do you do with that in AI? Like how do you rationalize the creative angst and tension that it?
Well, and that's also where the novel comes from as well, right?
Mhm.
What is novel? It's like, oh, I never thought about this, but I'm going to take a piece of this and a piece of that and a piece of the other thing. And if I put them together, nobody's done anything like that. And that looks cool, or that is.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting, Jeff. You're hanging some language on some stuff I've been thinking about for a while, because and Matt, you probably have it too. Every week in startup land, you're always there's something new you have to work on, whether it's super, in my world, it's not an artistic sort of creativity, but it's manifesting something new. And that phase of kind of processing through everything and finding the novel is really good. We need to find some more generalized language of that. But I think that space is almost protected in the long run. Right, Matt, I don't know if you see it in your world, but that kind of internal processing, and I can't quite see a world where AI does that for you, because there's no real proof that AI is doing anything novel. It's really just kind of mixing up the stuff that we have already.
Yeah, listening to what Jeff said about how he used the output, which is like it's going to get you somewhere, but you still need to have that angst. I think the idea of preparation and orienting yourself with AI is fantastic. And when I have a hard problem I need to work on, I've read a lot of productivity books, both, as a, you want to be a hack, what are they, like work really fast and kind of hack that level. But then also, my product is dealing with project management, and I want to be very well grounded in what actually works. And, when you approach a problem that you're really concerned with or maybe procrastinating on, a good technique is not to do the problem. It's to do everything to prepare for it. And that's how I sit down. When there's a problem I don't want to do, it's like, oh God, this is going to be painful. It's going to be like, there's a lot of risk, it's stressful. I say, oh, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to sit down and do everything necessary so that I can start the problem and it's all laid out. And that might involve printing things out on a computer and laying them all out in a room if it's really stressful, But, like having the preparation done. And that's where I found creative, from a creative perspective, AI is really helpful, is it allows me to instantly say, this is where I want to be in terms of, like you said, inspiration, context, but then you still got to go be there. So it's not like it's going to do the work for you. It's going to prepare you to be somewhere where you could do the work, which is still, for me, most of the game when especially when facing like these creative challenges that I have to really perform or they're not going to do well.
No, I was just going to say, I totally agree. And I think this is the big, if you talk Hollywood and the sort of bigger industry stuff, there's all kinds of conversations about, AI will never be able to create, X type of movie or this type of thing. And there's lots of debate and discussion about that. My quick hit on that, and then I want to bring it back down to kind of what I would say called practical AI, which is what we're talking about, is that there will, if you look at a Marvel movie or a pop song, those are structured like archetypes, like there's almost no creativity going into it. They are like setting it up. Here's the things that we need to do. So I have zero doubt that they will be able to make massive movies that will be wildly successful for large audiences. But there will always be an area for what I would call like human crafted, human inputted. And I think there's going to be this interesting split where you kind of have human crafted movies, human crafted art, human crafted different elements, digital art, and entertainment, which I think will be very, you can look at kind of like handcrafted furniture. Why would you buy handcrafted furniture when you could buy something for a tenth of the price at IKEA that almost is as maybe as good, depending on what you're looking for? So I think on a macro level, I think that's where it's going to go, and I think we should just accept it. And then we're already consuming pretty much AI generated movies in the form of, and songs in the form of pop music and like Marvel action movies. So it's already happening. But then when you bring it down, I think to the level of sort of day-to-day creative, I think it's going to be more pronounced because each request is more pronounced to the extent that there's going to need more human involvement because each project is much more custom and much more specific. So I think humans are really going to have to be involved, and that angst and creative approach is really important. And I would say some people don't need a super creative website, right? It's just you don't need it. So if you don't need a super creative website and you're not looking to make a splash, then just one day you'll just be able to ask AI to make it for you, and that's fine.
And I think all the fun of actually creating a website goes away at that point. Once you know that it can just be AI created, you end up with things like Facebook and Instagram and things like that, where there is no
Mhm.
design. Because what's the point of it? If you're just going to be looking at AI slop, and I think this is the problem with Marvel movies. It became formulaic to the point where everybody knows exactly, you don't have to go watch the new Marvel movie. You know exactly what it's going to look like and how it's going to sound. And it costs a lot of money to make. That doesn't make it interesting. And I'm using that as a segue to, I heard once that it might have been Kubrick, but who knows? I'm not a movie guy. To make a movie is a miracle, right? It's not something that you can go in and plan. Like you have to be ready at every moment to kind of just allow a miracle to happen. And even then, it's most movies are bad. Even the best directors have bad movies. It's not something that you can plan. And so it's like when I think of building a bigger and bigger agency, the chance for a miracle goes to zero because it becomes planned, it becomes streamlined, and I think
Mhm.
the ability to put all that work that would have been necessary to coordinate back out into the machine, then your job is just to, like you said, to create miracles. Like it's just to produce something that nobody expected at the beginning, and that's what you have to pay for. Um yeah.
No, no, I think it's really interesting. And I mean, one of the things that gives me so much confidence in what I'm doing right now, because I'm not trying to create the best new AI product, at least not right now, even though I'm always experimenting with, little AI mini projects or mini products, I would call them, uh, is that I feel AI is, they always say AI is at the worst it'll ever be, or the worst, it's always going to get better than it is today, right? So I have confidence that no matter what happens, my job will either get easier or the work will get better, no matter what. Like that's where it should be going, as far as how I scale. I think there's this interesting thing that happens, and you see this in teams, but I'll first apply it to my situation, where people feel bad when a certain project should take a certain amount of time or effort, and they give it to AI, and then it does it in 10 seconds, and then you deliver it. And obviously, a great example of that is like doing a research summary. Like research summaries, I think, are the perfect example of what AI just dominates right now, right? So if I go out, summarize these papers, look for some other sources, and bring it back to me in a sort of TLDR and give me that output, and it's there. So researchers are getting really nervous about that, and they feel bad. They don't want to tell their bosses that they're using AI, but obviously that should be embraced instead of sort of shunned away. What I would say, what's interesting on the creative side, is when you start to do work that maybe at one time you charge 10 grand for, 20 grand for, and then you do it, and you might be able to do it for something that would have cost like $500, like, or you do it in like an hour, and you go, wow, I just made like 20 grand in an hour for that. Should I lower my rates or should I tell them? Like, I think there's sort of this, or should I scale and change my business model to be able to output more? So,
Look, I think that's all. If you want to start an agency of any kind, a services firm, there's always a glitch. You always have to find a glitch to start a big firm. And if it's, I remember when I started my last services company, we just went in and, released stuff as fast as we possibly could because we didn't know better,
mhm,
right? We weren't like, we
mhm,
just didn't know what we were doing. And it was that glitch of we were using tools in 2015 that allowed us to go faster than companies that had been founded 15 years earlier. And so
sure.
we
Yep.
just built. And
Yep.
yeah, if you're
Yeah.
young,
And I
like
don't think you should feel bad about it. You just go for it. I mean, that's the
just go.
point.
It's like, hey, this costs $500. You got to go find a lot of customers then, and your kink in the hose or your bottleneck is going to be customer acquisition at that point. And so then I think that's the problem is that like if you make one thing easy, then something that you do not give a shit about suddenly becomes your entire job, which is lead generation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly, exactly. But I would say, I mean, the sort of interesting thing is where my sweet spot definitely is right now. I kind of call it like, and I said this probably 5 years ago when AI started first, or 3 years ago when AI first started really accelerating, was I said, where I want to be and what I want to do is be like the have the tool belt, be the person who knows how to use every tool. So come to me. I know how to use like the OpenAI tool. I know how to use like the Midjourney tool. I've got like a tool belt with all the different like Batman utility belt, and you ask me what I need to do, and I can do it, and I can craft it. If I need to use the bat utility rope to get up this building, I know that I need to use this with this sort of tension to get me up over the top. I mean, and that's just an example of where I position myself as really um, the the best create has the best AI creative tool belt to offer. So whatever the problem is, I can help you solve that problem. And I'm always trying to figure out how to bring that to the next step. Now, that doesn't mean I can just give you the tool belt and it'll just like work. You kind of need the human inside. You kind of need Batman or whomever it is to be able to manage those AI tools so that they can piece it all together. And so I think that that's a really exciting space to be, and continues to be how I serve clients. And every day it's a little bit of adapting.
That's the future, is just smaller and smaller teams until we really figure out how to scale every little ass expat. I think everyone just gets fixated that there should be these gigantic companies that and once you get into a giant company, especially growing it from like a small company to a big company, you realize it's like, no, this is mostly waste. It's mostly like the strangling creativity and any kind of interesting thing out of this process. And it's like, if we could have just made it, we could have just kept it 100 people or 20 people, it would have been beautiful.
Yeah.
And instead it became
And
bigger and not
exactly. And I think something on so this is what makes it even better or more exciting. So I'm a solo primarily shop right now, but I have done some other projects with some other people. And where it gets super supercharged is when you have like two Batmans, or like Batman and Wonder Woman or whatever. And you've got like, you're going crazy with AI tools and trying to optimize, creating imagery and doing all these things. And then your partner who you're working with is also doing that. And then it's just like, whew. Now what I would never, ever do, ever, is that, do I want to collaborate with somebody who is not fully embracing AI? To me, it's just, unless they have a very specific niche creative skill in some area, yes. But as far as a collaboration partner, I just can't imagine it.
So Matt and I've been talking about the big companies kind of having to re-architect themselves in an AI world. What you just said makes me believe that in the creative space, it might not be the companies themselves re-architecting, but kind of the world of consultants kind of re-architecting. Is that another kind
I
of
think
manifestation
so.
of that?
So I would say what my dream and my goal for what I'm doing right now has always been, since I first started this, was spend the first 1 to 2 years doing everything by myself, as much as I can by myself, so that I have 100% quality control through the entire process. I understand everything in the entire process so that I can always jump in and fix things. But then ultimately, what I want to be doing is doing projects with multiple people, groups of contractors likely. In my head, the ideal world is probably like 2 to 4 contractors who are all individually motivated, owning their own business. So they're not just collecting a paycheck. They can grow this on their own, and they have an autonomy to grow it on their own. But each person carves out a little bit of a different niche within a project. So if you take project management, for example, there are things that I really don't like, and there are things that I do like as far as it relates to a project, all the way from lead acquisition right through closing on delivering the project and QA and billing. I think there's probably a sweet spot of maybe 3 people, maybe 4, if you were to really like draw it out, where you might have somebody who decides to start an AI business and they're like, I'm really good at like account management and administration and managing all of these tools. Maybe it's like lead management, and that's what they do full time. And maybe they have 10 clients, and all they do is AI management for multiple different companies for that area. Maybe they do it all for me, and I'm like, great. And then I jump into the middle and I'm really deep in the design and the creative side, and I can take that slice. And now the partner that I've worked on a previous project, who's big on AI, he's a dev. So he's very technical. And we worked really well together, and he was like kind of the next slice. Now I do as much dev as I can, but anybody who's not technical, who says they are actually creating meaningful technical projects with AI, they might be creating prototypes and MVPs and things that kind of show things, then that's great. But like it's still really is valuable to have a technical person, in my opinion. And then you might have a salesperson or a billing person or QA, for somebody who just like looks after the pure total deployment of the whole thing. So I think there's going to be contracting teams that could be 2 to 4 people that will be powerhouses.
So 2 questions, maybe just to wrap it up. One, that structure of that sort of mini team, is that replacing 4 different agencies in the past? Like, are we going from 40 people to 4 people? Like, what would that architecture replace in kind of the old world model?
Well, I think in the creative space, I think right now, I mean, the big creative areas are photography, videography, animation, print ads, websites, digital ads. So all those different areas. So I would say, I think that there'll be a primarily split line for sure when it comes to original creative work and sort of okay to be non-original or stock or AI created. So and I think that will always be that way. So imagine you're a community brand, or like I've worked with some nonprofits who do rainforest work, and they do interviews with people in the rainforest and do videos. Um, you're not going to create that with AI, because the whole point is it's the story. So you need the real video on the ground. So I would say there will always be sort of what I would call like live production creative teams that will always need to do real live work. I will never be able to do that sitting, at least I don't think, sitting from my laptop. So I think that's one way to slice it, from sort of the live teams to sort of the AI generated teams. As far as what it splits down as far as big creative agencies, I mean, even in the non-AI world, creative agencies are massively bloated, and you work with 7 different people, from 2 junior account managers, and account manager and account director, then so it's just massive. I don't see any reason that there shouldn't be any more than one person doing design, copy, and general layouts on any type of creative work.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody last week who was talking about they were using Grok for copywriting, and they had 8 or 9 internal copywriters, and they used Grok instead. And he was like, I don't need any of these people now. I'm sure they do a bunch more than that, but just the quality of work is of output is phenomenal. So we need to land this plane, and Jeff, we're going to put you on the spot a little bit, and Matt, you're on the spot too, as usual. So we're geeks, right? And there's so much new AI stuff coming out constantly. And so we try to wrap up by asking the question, what did we see this week that or this month or more recently, that kind of piqued our interest? So Jeff, from your kind of unique vantage point, or at least different from ours, anything you've seen you'd say to folks, go check that out, you'll enjoy it?
Well, I mean, I think 100% that the ChatGPT image generation is the biggest game changer in the last few weeks from a creative point of view. I was and still am a heavy Midjourney user. Midjourney just came out with V7 just a few days after ChatGPT came out with their image generation. And the way that I would articulate the difference between the two, if you're looking at them, is if you have a very specific prompt and you want to get something very have a specific idea, you put it into ChatGPT. It takes like a couple of minutes sometimes to actually give you the generation back, but it will deliver absolutely stellar results. And obviously, when you want to start riffing on different types of image styles, it's absolutely unbelievable, and it's just fun and addicting to do. But I think on the Midjourney side, Midjourney 7 has this really cool mode called draft voice mode, where you can talk to it. So you can sit and talk to Midjourney and say, give me a picture of a giraffe with a jetpack on, walking on the surface of the moon. No, change it to a savanna. No, now change it to this, and it will be dynamically creating images as you're basically talking within seconds, which is a very interesting.
This is what Ian wants, but for product meetings, he can just kind of diagram and describe it.
No, it's 100%. But it's that multimodal, Jeff. There's a couple of themes that if you listen to our episodes, that Matt and I always revert to. But it's a multimodal part. It's what's that most natural way to interact with the task that you want to do. And so my mind is kind of blown and really open by the image stuff. Last question. We're going super long, but that's because this is good. Video generation. Have you spent any time on that? What's your sense of what's going on there?
I mean, I was a very early adopter of Runway ML, so sort of the original leader in all that space, and I was experimenting extensively with creating video there. And then I kind of took a hiatus when it sort of became overflowing with all the different models. And now I've come back, and I generally use Kling AI as the latest, because it's sort of the easiest, and it does the job. And I would say most of my work isn't done, and I don't do a lot of production video. It's mostly more sort of low-level entertainment. But what I have used for video, and I've used Runway and I've used Kling primarily, is for rolling header videos and things. I have a header video on a website, and there's lots of little 2-second clips. I found it's really good for that. You do a 2-second clip of a skyline, and a 2-second clip of a cityscape, or whatever, or somebody in a coffee shop on a phone. That kind of stuff that used to require whole video agencies to go out and do. And Ian, we made videos like that together. You can now get those 2-second clips. So I think for really short form video, it's actually quite good. And I have no question that we're moments away from many feature films, kind of being in the AI videos.
They're already sneaking it in, and people are really upset. They're going to run into the unions because they're fixing people's faces and stuff like that. And those are all days that people would have got paid for that don't have to be shot again.
It's crazy.
Little fixes instead of reshoots.
Yeah.
My thing this week, Ian, since you asked, is memory being added to OpenAI's
Mm.
main app. So I have all these conversations, and I'm trying to test it and stuff like that. And it's, what am I? And it, on the one hand, is really interesting because it goes back and it looks at, previous conversations. But then, I also brought up the example, it goes and reads my LinkedIn and comments on those and brings those in. So I think producing content with AI and then having that content be consumed by the AI, that is a big, big problem for Google because it's starting to, once the AI is creating more data through the interaction with users than it's consuming from the outside internet, that becomes extremely defensible for a company like OpenAI. And I see why they adopted that very quickly. I think there's going to be a lot of work needed on segmentation, though, because it says, well, wow, you really have all these interesting, you're kind of bimodal. You're a really interesting person who has all these questions about physics, but you also have like a lot of very basic questions and answer them as a child. And I'm like, that's my daughter, okay? 4. So, there's some work that's needed, but it's a very interesting concept, this idea of producing a data set and then actually making it part of the main experience
Yeah.
is going to be
Yeah.
really, really big for.
Something on that one, just as a quick aside on that, or amplifier on it, was I saw a post on X that said, with that new mode, ask it to identify your weaknesses and what you can work on.
Oh, it was
Blind
harsh.
spots.
I
Yeah.
was like, this is good. Ooh, this is good. And it was not stuff that I would have gotten from anyone else. It was like, hey, if you considered these things, I was like, I'm not going to talk about that on the podcast.
Wow.
Well, Jeff, you stole my one, and that was going to be the prompt that I was gonna that I tried this weekend. That was interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, what are my blind spots? But Jeff, thanks for joining us this week. Super interesting conversation.
Yeah, fantastic, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and
Of
remind
course.
us again, where can people find you if they need to find you?
Yeah, bzdesign.com, bzy design.com, and or on Twitter or X at my name, Jeff Berezny, JeffBerezny.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Matt.
Great to chat, guys. See ya.
Talk soon.